Hello, everyone. Let me fix my camera. There we go. I hope you can hear me. Oop, I see I'm coming through a few different spots, so let me mute some things. There we go. Happy Tuesday. Happy Wednesday. Happy Tuesday to Query. Happy Wednesday to everyone else. Hope y'all are doing well. This is kind of a not a last minute stream. I knew I was going to be doing a stream today, but I thought I'd be at the studio doing it, and we were going to do some other things, but I've got some sick kids at home, so I'm coming to you from my house right now. I hope you can all hear me just fine. Okay, let me just make sure that all this stuff is out and in the right place, and then we will get right to it. Okay, bum. I turned my... Should I fix that? Yes, Patrick. Use the giant knob. Press your computer's turbo button and twist the giant knob. Okay, so what are we doing today? Today I want to talk about arcs and take you through the design where it's at, and I'm happy to get very specific and get into the weeds and just sort of like give you a teach through the game. Let me actually, by way of there's like a few different ways that I can do this. So one way that I could do this is by loading up the version that is out there right now. And then I will talk through some of the things that have changed in it and why they changed. And then I will go to the new version and show you how it works. Throughout this process, I'll have the chat window open. And I will definitely answer any questions you might have. I hope everyone's having a really wonderful day. I've had it's been an interesting time here, kind of a bumpy week, but actually, despite that, it's been a good week. It's been just kind of a strange few days. But we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and I'm really happy with how everything's gone. In fact, I just finished this morning a really lovely playtest of ARCs, and at the very end of the playtest, there was consensus about a few areas to watch and some numbers that we needed adjusting, but I thought, like, okay, if the internal playtesters bear out what we just played in our playtest, then this thing's pretty much ready to go. Ready to go to you all out. It's not done yet. There's still a lot of work to be done. Okay. You were playtesting ARCs, Patrick, just now? Hope so. Patrick doesn't know this, but like in about 4 weeks, I'm going to be totally commandeering the studio and directing all playtesting efforts towards ARCs because it's time to get it done. So enjoy your path playtests while you can. Yeah, I'm happy to do a little mini teach and kind of show some of this stuff as we go through. Okay, so let's get right to it. Okay, so this is the arcs that we released with the Kickstarter version, and what I want to say about it. This is an interesting game to release because I don't know. I mean, it fundamentally, I like kind of stand by it as a design. I think it like fundamentally was coherent and worked. It just didn't quite measure up to some of the ambitions that I had for it. So, we had, for instance, these little objective cards that'd be in a little market. This is all the Kickstarter stuff. This is all stuff that you know. And this little marching market would give you kind of like little things that you'd be bidding on and sort of like playing. This I'm being a little scattered here, but you're like one second. Let me fix my camera. Boop. You are when you're playing this version of ARCs, you are really playing a trick-taking game where these are the tricks. These like little these objectives. So we had those working. It felt a little arbitrary though. It wasn't as player-driven as I'd like. We had a map. I wanted the map to have a little more texture than the old than the base route map. So we had these little spots here that could do various things. And then we had this market deck with these acquire slots. Something weird happening here with these. There we go. There's a tech. And players bid on these cards and take these cards and do various things with them. The player boards have these slots in them, which we use for different kind of technologies. And then in addition, we had these like late game actions, which would come out into the market, and these would be like big instant effects. And so that was my way of dealing with the problem of the market getting stale in the late game. So rather than like if the core design wasn't producing the dynamism I wanted, I like had this breakthrough system that like introduced that dynamism. And that's fine. That's a totally reasonable way to design a game. It's not usually how I design games, but I thought it worked pretty well. And then we also had these like final objective cards and these private objective cards. And basically, when I left the Kickstarter, I kind of thought I am not. So there were a bunch of things I wasn't happy with. So I wasn't happy with basically the places where I felt like I was doing design band-aids. So I'll give you an example. One of those wormholes. The map needed to be a little bit more connected. So I had these wormholes. Didn't like them from a thematic perspective, didn't like them from a mechanical perspective, but they did the job they needed to do, which is that they made the map a little bit more connected. Not necessarily much smaller, but they made the map more connected. So I thought, okay, I'll put wormholes in. Or if I need the market to be more dynamic, breakthroughs, that's the little band-aid. Or in the case of the victory points, I wanted players to have personal victory points they were going for. I wanted them to be reactive to opportunities being presented by the game that were somewhat arbitrary. And then I also wanted the game to have an overall narrative thrust being provided by these final objective cards. And all three of those things were kind of like working together to create like the feeling that I wanted. But individually, I wasn't crazy about any of them. So even as we were working on the Kickstarter, I thought like, okay, when we get this through the end of development, at the end of the end of the Kickstarter, I'm almost certainly going to be revising the objective cards in some particular way. Okay, so we had all those things. Um, and what else do I want to say about the version at Kickstarter? It was well, I don't know. There's a lot to say about it, but that kind of gives you a sense of where I felt like there were some problems. I also knew that there were like some problems with how the rating system was working. We knew that the tech and market were a little slow, and we went into the summer trying to fix those things. And we did a lot of different ways. We made versions of the game that were lighter and faster. We made versions of the game that were heavier and slower. And we made versions of the game that were much more thematically grounded. And actually, one of the things that happened during the Kickstarter, so I had written a thematic brief, like maybe 2,000 words, not very substantial, that outlined the history of the world that the game was set in. And that's something that I usually do, but I don't flesh out very much. And then actually during the Kickstarter and over the summer, I expanded that thematic brief to be it's more like 10 or 15,000 words now, and it is a really big document. It covers lots of things. And so as I was working on the game, I thought, okay, well now I've got a better sense of this game's world. How am I going to fold those things into the game? Now, one thing that I alluded to in the update is that Arx's development has had a weird kind of a cyclical process. So like basically when we were building Arx, I knew I wanted it to be a campaign game initially, but you can't just build a campaign game. You got to make sure that the individual session has integrity. So I would work on the individual session, get it humming, and then we'd work on the campaign game. And the campaign game would reveal problems with the individual session, and then I'd go back to working on the individual session and fixing it, and then the individual session would reveal problems with the campaign game, and vice versa. They were constantly breaking and fixing each other, which is why, like, when people started talking to me about, like, oh, it seems like the single session version is like a weird, not intended, like spawn of the campaign game, that was like never true. Like we were always playing the single session game before the campaign game. We had to. It's just how development works. But as we were building this out, I kept trying to think about different ways of folding some of the stuff I loved about the campaign game into the single session formula. So over the course of the summer, and this is something I've talked about in design streams before, we experimented with like making the game scenario based and maybe setting them in different parts of the past. That was like one of the last things I started working on before we ended the Kickstarter. Or potentially rooting the single session game in different periods in the past. And we've kind of we've adapted some of those ideas, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But one thing that happened over the course of the summer then is we were constantly um, revisiting the core promise of the single session game and asking ourselves, like, what is the best version of this game? And I kind of found myself leaning on the idea of the best version of the single session game is a game that is dramatic and aggressive and coherent from a narrative standpoint. So, and this is where I have to be careful using like the word arcadey, because I've talked about like the arcadey version of Arcs, which is Arcs as like a fast and loose game. I never wanted there to be an arcadey version that didn't also feel thematically grounded. And so I started thinking about the game as I looked at all the different scenarios we had, and I said, there's one scenario set kind of like in the quasi-space Middle Ages, maybe about 300 years before the campaign game takes place, like 400 years before the campaign game takes place. And it's that setting that I want to build out and make the setting of the single session game. A little bit how Risk is like set in this weird Napoleonic past that's like a little bit cartoonish. I wanted the single session art game to be set in this like high medieval period that would be in the legendary past of the players who are imagined as the same characters in the campaign game. So like I've talked about this a little bit before, but for folks who are just kind of coming in, I really liked the idea of the players as like young regents in this decaying empire playing this game that was about the halcyon days. And so Arcs then becomes this like object within its own world. Okay, so let's get into it now. Let's talk about the new stuff. Okay, so we're going to go back here, and I'm going to load up the secret dev branch of Arcs, and we'll talk about what's going here. So first, I'll just say one general thing about the graphics here. You're going to see some graphics that look nicer than what was out at around the time of the Kickstarter, and then you're going to see other graphics which are way more stripped down. And so one example I'll give is the map itself. You'll note that this map is a little bit less pretty than, a little cleaner maybe is the nice way to put it, than the Kickstarter map. That's because I went through and cleaned up the file and got it down to just its simplest elements. And we will be putting art on it and getting it looking nice over the coming weeks and months. So like we actually are making progress. Now, when it comes to the map. Now, one thing I'll say about the map generally is you will notice the map is larger. Now, it's still a 4-panel board. So if you think about this as a piece of US letter-sized paper-ish, we're still looking at a 4-panel board, but there are more systems. It is about a fourth larger than the old board, and that is because I wanted the 3-player map. Like the old map felt pretty good at 3 players, and then at 4 players it felt a little tight. And so with this map, I've tried to strike a balance where I want the 4 and 3-player game to feel a little bit more similar. And the way we do that now is when you're playing a 3-player game, we have these hyperlane pieces, which I'm just using giant checkers. Obviously, we're not going to include giant checkers. These hyperlane pieces, you will block off, the player with the initiative before you do setup, will block off 2 edge systems that are empty and 3 edge systems that have planets, although you can't block off all of a single planet type. And then what that does is it creates, these aren't simply blocks, they're hyperlanes. So the way that works is if you have like a piece here, it can move here or here or here or here. Like these are, you can like pass through them. So what it does is it just creates a little bit of connectivity on the board edge, which is nice, but it also allows there to be a lot of scenario variability, which is nice. So we have these hyperlanes here. Nothing too wild about how those work. One big change, though, you'll notice right away, we no longer have special systems. No more like research station or trade paths or any of that stuff. And the reason why those are gone is because we tried to just make basically everything I wanted those that terrain, that map texture to do. I wanted it to happen organically. And I think here of a game, I think Splatter's games are really good examples of this, like Food Chain and also Great Zimbabwe, because the maps of those games have such great texture. And they don't have texture because when you play Food Chain, it's like, oh, this is the highway. Your cars go, distances are halved because the cars move so fast along the highway. It's like, no, 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 no. The map is simple, but then it builds its texture because of how it relates to the core mechanisms of the game. And so I just kind of like kept that as my guiding star through this. Okay, so we've got that going on. Now let's talk about pieces. So we are in the process of figuring out what kind of pieces we want for this game. We had initially planned on using root style pieces, these like little 18 millimeter squares with damaged sides and undamaged sides, which I like. They work fine. Although line art is a little tricky to tell differences. Like obviously these two things look very different, especially on a screen, but in different lighting conditions and from farther distances, they can get a little muddy. So we've been experimenting with using buildings. So here's the city building and here's the starport building. Now this, if you go top down on TTS, is awful, right? Who knows what these things are? But you never look at a game top down. You always look at a game from about this angle. And so there's a nice division there. And also in person, they look just quite different. It's also allowing us to play with some sizing concerns. So for example, the ships are probably going to be like that compared to the starport in the city. So there'll be a nice like chunky division there. Now, I don't know if we're going to be able to include these wooden pieces yet. It is something that we are exploring, that we're trying to make work. And if it happens, great. And if it doesn't happen, or if there's a better way to do it, then we'll follow the better way. I mean, this is one of my favorite things about working at Leader is that we get to be guided by what we think makes the game better. And if it's going to cost a little bit more, like we have a lot of tools on the back end, adjusting MSRPs, changing around some things, where we can make it work. We're just interested in giving y'all like the best version of the game. Okay, now one of the reasons why we really liked these pieces is because we have a new rule. When you're determining control, I'll go ahead and take off these. There you go. So you can see those slots. So when you're determining control, you add up all of the, here, we'll swap that out. You add up all the undamaged units. So if you're trying to figure out like who controls this spot, well, it's 3 undamaged units compared to 2 undamaged units. So blue is controlling that zone. But like over here, if blue had 2 damaged fleets outside this city, now suddenly yellow is controlling it. So and then that is just the golden rule for control. You just count undamaged pieces. And because you're looking at pieces standing up or sitting down, or laying down, I should say, it just made things so much clearer. And I've really liked how that feels when you play it. Okay, cool. So that's some changes there. Now, I just like there is somebody said in the Kickstarter comments that like, oh, wood is not a very spacey material, and I agree, of course, but the caveat I would put is that space in board games, space usually means kind of a Stellaris style like modern video game UI and plastic. And one of the things that Kyle is trying to do is we're trying to create a much more analog sense of space, which means we're using materials like wood, which look a lot better with Kyle's style of illustration. I mean, Kyle draws everything by hand. We really like the kind of imperfections of whatever mode, a little ink splatter or something. And so the idea of having wooden pieces with wooden grain like really lends itself to it. And that's one reason why we changed how the action cards look, which I'll talk about later. Okay, so a couple important things about how buildings have changed. So one thing, you'll notice those wormholes aren't on this map anymore. One thing that we did is we've made it so that starports, if you have ships that are moving from a starport, instead of moving one spot, they can move twice as far. They can move 2. So in this place, you still have to follow the rules. So you still go from a place you control. You have to either move to or from a place you control, just like root. But now, if you're moving from a starport initially, any number of the moving forces, let's say it was like this, can move a second time. So you could even drop one off like that. This allows the starports to be like little jumping off platforms, and that can create a really fun dynamic. This is something that we actually talked about in the game today. So let's say you've got a starport here and you've got a little fleet. This fleet can go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So they have a lot of striking distance from this one port. However, if some baddie comes sits here and repairs their fleet, now because of the movement rules, if I use my first movement to come out here, I no longer rule this location, which means I can't just keep moving, which means a single fleet in the center can shut down a lot of the board movement. And I really enjoy the kind of blocking that can happen because of these movement rules, and it really puts a lot of interesting action pressure on the repair action, because you can use the repair to like bottle up enemy fleets. Okay, all right, so that's some movement stuff. Now, oh, sorry, that's my bad. Let me fix all this. Nope, not there. Sorry, that's the danger of a one-person run stream right there. Just enjoy the little slideshow. Okay, so let's talk about other things that the buildings do. So one thing that we did with the starports is we've allowed people. We've kind of loosened up the action system. So, for example, normally when you're building ships and you're spending build actions to build those ships, you can only use every starport once. You can use each of your starports once. But now you are allowed to use one of your starports a second time in a turn, but you have to damage the starport. Now what that does is it essentially allows you to deficit spend on your starports. So I can say, you know what, I want to use my extra build action to build here, and I promise I'll repair the starport later. You can't do that anymore once you've got a damaged starport. So there's a little bit of deficit spending that can happen there, which is fun. And then cities have become very important in the game. Now when we do scoring at the end of every round, not yet. We do scoring at the end of every round, players get points for every city they have on the board, and this is critical, each enemy city they control. So, if you're in a spot where, so I'm playing blue here, and maybe you've damaged some yellow cities and you've got your ships out there, and then blue also has a city of their own, for sake of example. We'll put two cities out here. So blue at the end of the turn, so let's say I'm yellow. So when I'm scoring my city points, I have 2 cities. So I get 1 point as listed here. Boop, just 1 little point. And then blue, though, counts their own cities, of course, but then also counts cities that they control. So in this case, blue, I'm getting 1 point, and blue has 4, so they're getting 3 points, according to this little chart. And what this does is it gives an incentive for players to go control the cities of others. And I'll talk about those incentives further in a little bit. Someone asked, Mikey asked, will this be on YouTube later? It will. However, because of how we post videos on YouTube, it might be a couple weeks because the person who usually helps with some of the captioning is on vacation. So we will be posting this to YouTube, of course, but just not yet. Okay, so if you have 2 copies of ARCs, can you play 2 to 8 players? No. You could play next to each other. I can't stop you from doing that. Okay, so other advantages to cities. So you use cities to tax, and cities, by the way, during the Kickstarter we call these extractors, which was like a little too antiseptic, right? And so now they're called cities, so the game has a little bit more of the good biopolitics. And then if you have a city, when you take the tax action, you take the resource matching that city. And critically, you can do this for your own cities and also cities that you control. So blue, if blue wanted to tax, they can take relics. They can act like this was their city if there are relics in the pool. Now, one big change here is that now we only have 5 resources in each of the pools. And you'll note that these are no longer cards. They're just little tokens. We did that mostly to clean up the table space of the game. Okay, so yeah, you can tax cities. You can also do, of course, raids. Raiding has had a big change in how raiding works. So the way raiding works, and I love this, and I'll give Josh a huge bit of credit here. We've been scratching our head about raids for a long time, and Josh proposed, we like talked about it for a while and things we wanted the raid system to do, and then Josh hit me with such a good suggestion. I've really liked what it does to the game. The way it works is we've changed the raid dice so that basically two of the faces that had keys are now double keys. So it's that face and this face get double keys, and then the single raid face is still there. So here are all the raid faces. So you have a 50% shot per raid die of rolling some number of keys. Maybe at the jackpot, maybe you do okay, or maybe you do great, but you also take damage. The keys, though, the way it works is you can spend a number of keys to steal things. Now, how many keys can you spend? Well, you have to roll the keys, obviously, but then there's also a threshold based on the enemy. So in this case, the rule is every damaged piece lets you spend 1 key, and every building lets you spend 1 key, which means if you're dealing with a damaged city, you could spend up to 2 keys. Now, critically, when you roll, let's say I had rolled this, I would have to damage that city. And then I wouldn't be able to spend any keys because I destroyed the thing I was trying to take. So there's some, like, there are reasons why you wouldn't just, like, fill your hand with raid dice and go for the jackpot. Because if you overcommit, if you, like, destroy the thing you're trying to take, you're not going to get it. So there's always a little bit of risk in play in terms of, like, how you're going to steal and what you're going to take. And then those extra die faces allowed us to do some expressiveness. So whenever you get a resource, you either put it on the leftmost position of your resource track, or you always add it to the end. And as you're getting resources, let's say I get a relic, I can choose, like, do I want to put my relic in the more secret spot, or do I want to just make it so it only costs 2 keys instead of 3? And then that gets a little harder, like when you get, like, okay, now I've got this weapon, I really need this weapon. Like, I can't have anybody steal this weapon, but if I put it here, it's going to, like, make my fuel easier to take. And what I liked about this is it did it created the thing of, if you have a lot of resources, they tend to be easier to steal. If you've only got one thing, you can, like, keep it safe, keep it secret. Yeah, so that's how it goes. It was diamonds before raids. I don't know if it's going to stay keys. I do like keys, but we're just going to see how it goes. We will see how it goes. There's a whole question about that. Now, one other change that we did for battles is we've changed hit allocation to be a little bit cleaner. And the way it works is, like, the attacker gathers their dice, they choose what they want, they roll the dice, and then the attacker allocates all hits. They choose what of their own pieces they're going to damage, how they're going to damage them. They choose what of the enemy that they're going to damage, how they're going to damage it. Which means if you want to do a suicide run and get your ships in and just spend all your hits to destroy the enemy cities, you totally can. The game will not stop you. It's not going to turn into that, like, Axis and Allies style battling where you just keep killing, like, 1 infantry every turn to protect, like, a bomber or something. So there's there's that's how the combat has been changed. But it's actually, the combat's been pretty stable. Hardly has changed at all. Now, one reason why you might not want to go kill cities. So we got rid of the rule where buildings that you destroy are worth a point. So that isn't true anymore. We got rid of the buildings being worth a point. But cities have a few consequences. So let's say blue decides they want to destroy the city. Well, the first thing that happens is that blue is going to gain or lose points depending on the power differential. So if blue is punching down, so you'll note that the victory point track has a number of these bands on it. If blue is attacking someone, for every band that they are below them, they lose a point. So if blue destroys this yellow city, blue is going to lose a point. But let's say yellow is up here, and blue wants to kill this yellow city. They're going to gain 1, 2, 3, 4 points for destroying that city. So that happens. And then there's an important consequence. So let's say blue destroys this relic city. Well, all the protectors of relics get very upset. They're not happy at all at what blue's done. So if blue has a relic, they have to sacrifice that relic. If they don't have a relic, they take it from the bank. If the bank is empty, they take it from anywhere. And that relic turns into terror. There you go. So this terror means a couple things. So one, blue's hold size has now been shrunk by 1. So they've gone from being able to hold 6 resources to 5. 2, any cards associated with relics, if they had like a minister who like loved relics were their faves, they would have to discard all of those. A little bit like Strife in Porphyriana or the Patriots in Pamir. If you destroy cities of a certain type, those people do not like you. So that's the other thing that happens. And then lastly, they're called hatred right now in the mob, but they're going to be called terror. Here's all the text for people who like screen capping. There you go. Just have that. And some of this text hasn't been edited yet, so apologies for errors. But the terror, there's all sorts of things that you can do. Terror. You can never get rid of terror, but there are many powers that key off of it. So if you have a lot of terror, you can get points and do things with it. Cool. All right, so that is how terror works. All right, let's talk about the market, because the market has changed a little bit. So the way the market works is there's always 3 cards up for auction, and I'm going to find the 3 different types of cards. Okay, so the 3 different types of cards are Vox Populi, relics, basically, like locked relics, some title like that, I don't know. Technologies, basically, and then guild cards, which are actual people who have certain feelings and things like that. Generally, these are cards that the moment you get the card, it is spent, and it's like an instant. These are cards that are one-shots. You can keep them and then spend them later, and they also give a small passive bonus. And these cards give you permanent bonuses that also change your scoring, and I'll talk about them last. So we'll go in from left to right. So, for example, Inspiration, when secured, so when you take this card, you shuffle it to the discard pile, and you shuffle the action discards, you draw 3, you get to keep 1. So this allows you to get another action card. That's nice. This one, you'll note that it has a start of your turn effect. You can discard this card to put 1 ship in 4 different planetless systems, or passively, it is worth a fuel. So for victory conditions, it's like you have just a fuel in your hand. You can't spend it as a fuel, but it acts like a fuel. This victory point, this identity, is what you have to worry about when it comes to getting terror. Because if you destroy the fuel planet and you have the Pathkeepers are going to leave you on the street. They're not interested. Okay, and then lastly, we have a tech. The techs give persistent effect. And then they also provide you with some scoring opportunities. So, for example, the Galactic Rifles lets you shoot adjacent to one of your systems with bombard dice. And if you destroy a player's last piece in a system, you get power, which is great. But then it also has this scoring category Improver in the top right, which says when you score this type of victory condition, you get an additional 3 points. And now we will talk about scoring. Okay. Oh, yeah, I should talk about how you get these cards, actually. So there's a new action in the game called Secure. And the way Secure works is at the start of your turn, or not the start of your turn, but if you have the most cubes on a card and you spend the Secure action, you take the card and resolve it. And then a new card comes into the market. Now that means that these cards aren't resolved at the end of the turn anymore. It's very fluid. You might have a hand where 5 or 6 cards get resolved. You might have a hand where 2 cards get resolved, or 1. And that's totally fine. And I've tried to like unlink the progression of the market from any particular part of the game. You'll also notice, by the way, that there's no round tracker on this board. It's gone. The game has generally been lasting 3 or 4 hands. I think it can go to 5 or even 6 in certain circumstances. But the current condition is when a player crosses 30 in the 4-player game or 35 in the 3-player game, you finish scoring that hand. You like complete the hand, and then whoever has the most points wins. Okay. Yes, correct, Josh. So there's never a situation where you can like dump a bunch of cubes on a card and then instantly secure it. Now, These cards, you might imagine, are a bit more powerful than the other cards in the deck because they give you a cool power and they allow you to have scoring and they're totally persistent. They also can't be stolen, whereas this card has a little key on it. You can raid this from someone. This card you get forever. And because they're better, they have an additional condition, which is when you are securing, you have to spend a relic to secure it. Okay, cool. That is that. Now let's talk about those action cards. I'm realizing that I'm almost out of things to talk about, which is wild because there is so much. I feel like we've done so much work on this design, and then I show it, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's still like 80% the same game. It feels very different though. Okay, let's talk about action cards. So first, I got rid of the double suited zeros. They're gone. Now we have zeros and sixes, which we'll talk about. It's kind of a weird way to do it, but there you go. You understand zeros and sixes, which are single suited. And then the card anatomy for this new deck is that you have an illustration with a number of key objects, like 3 crates, to indicate that there are also 3 pips. It has a value for initiative, the name of the suit, and the actions, build, repair. Yeah, they've turned out super good. We might have to redo the back because I think the back doesn't quite gel with them anymore. But I do like the back. I don't know. We'll think about it. We'll think about it. I do think that they look really awesome though. And then in the bottom left we have a scoring condition, which I'll talk about in a second. I saw someone in the Discord comments talked about left-right binding on the cards. And I just want to say that I think it's an interesting point. But I also think it's wrong. I think it's wrong-headed because I think, so for example, the point is left-handed players prefer to fan their cards the opposite way, which I'm left-handed. I've played trick takers with many of the people in my family are left-handed. I've never met anyone who's fanned the cards the other way, but I've been told it's a regional thing. Like people in certain parts of the world will fan cards differently, especially in Japan, someone mentioned to me, which I thought was really interesting. But the reason why I'm not worried about it, or I'm not doing it, is because a small user preference is different from accessibility. So the user preference, I think about 18xx games. Some people want to fan their shares to the left. Some people want to fan their shares up and down. Fine. You can fan and so some people say well, I design my shares to be fanned either way. Yeah, in this instance, we're actually going to prioritize the art over that player preference because even if you usually fan your cards the other way, it's not that hard to fan them this way. And it's so that's and I'm kind of happy to make that call. And if we drop a very small number in the opposite corner, maybe, but I would rather not, frankly. And then likewise, these cards don't have to be colorblind friendly. And I say that as someone who is colorblind. And it's because you have the name of the suit right here and the illustration. And in shade, they are in brightness, they are different enough. Oh, I guess I should shuffle this so I get a better set. They are different enough from one another that even if your colorblindness is having these read the same, we have double indicated that they're a different suit by both the illustration on the card and the text. So these colors don't need to be colorblind friendly, which is very important because the things that do need to be colorblind friendly, you want to make space in the game's color language for the things that need that space, basically. So one way, the one way that I think about this is imagine a big color wheel. Or not color wheel, but as if you're picking a color. I don't know if you'd call that a color wheel, like a big. Kyle, help me. What do you call that big the RGB gradient that does all the colors? I don't know. It has a name. You could think about all the colors in the game having a location mapped on that Cartesian plane, and when you're making things colorblind friendly, you are. I don't know if it's technically a palette because it's all colors. And I don't know if it's technically a color wheel because it's all colors and not just anyway, it doesn't matter. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you imagine that little color gradient, the palette of all existing colors, anything that you make colorblind friendly tends to stretch out over that palette, which is fine, but it can be hard to make it look good because you are doing things that are jarring with more natural palettes. Color picker, yeah, this is good. Thank you, chat. Color spectrum, yes, I think it's the color spectrum. Anyway, and when we're designing the, or I should not when we're designing, when Kyle's designing the color space of the game, it's great when we can get things to occupy very little parts of it, because then that saves room in the color space of the game for things to make other things colorblind friendly. So anyway, it's a complicated thing, and we do our best with it. Gamut, that's good. Okay, so anyway, there we go with all the, and I'll show an aggression card. Someone said that like the ones that look most similar are the aggressions and the constructions, which is funny because with my color blindness, it's the administration and mobilization that look close. It doesn't matter because they are different enough, and we are still tweaking them a little bit, but they're different enough that you are getting keyed by the word aggression or the word construction or the illustration themselves. So anyway, okay, so here they are. A couple little changes here. One, we got rid of the, I can't remember what it was called, production suit. It's now called administration, and you'll see that it's associated with taxing, repairing, or influencing. The construction action, excuse me, the construction action now does builds or repairs. That's nice. And the build action has been changed to be a lot stronger. We dropped the build costs for buildings. So, oh boy, I fought this for so long and I was just wrong. I was just wrong. I think that the game is better with no build action, with no build cost. You want to put a city down, you just put a city down. And then the aggression cards have battle or move or secure. And so secure is interesting. Secure is the action that you use to move them to get the market cards. Now this is actually a very funny dimension of our current card dynamic, where construction cards are special because they have one unique action, build and repair. Mobilization cards have no unique actions. You can always do it somewhere else. Administration actions have one unique action. They're the only place to tax. Construction actions are the ones to build, and then the aggression suit is the only suit where you can battle or secure. And so the aggression cards, depending on how these come out, can really tilt the game in different ways. And we're still like adjudicating that balance. But I've actually really liked the card play dynamics so far. So this is sort of working. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. All that's good. Here's this. Now let's talk about that victory condition. So the way the game works now is when you're the lead player and you play a card to lead, you may spend one of the actions. So this is a 2-action construction card. You may spend one of those actions to declare a victory condition. And the victory condition you declare is the one on the bottom left. So the first one that is declared is always worth 6 points, then 4, then 3. So you always have a 6-card hand in this version of the game, which means basically half of the hands might see a victory condition declared. And you put it on the matching one. So in this case, I'd say I'm playing the construction 2. I'm going to put this on the warlord condition, which is this like broken ship. Apologies, Kyle. I drew this icon. I'm sure you'll make a nicer one. I have no idea if it's anything like Terraforming Mars' awards. I feel like the version of Terraforming Mars I played didn't have them, or it's just been so long. I last played that game in 2017, like right when it came out, maybe earlier. I don't know. I can't even remember when it came out. It came out while I was still in Texas. I know that. So maybe 2016. Don't know. Can't remember. Okay, so you can use one of the actions to declare the award. And you put the little token out here. And then, because you had the gumption to declare a reward, you get a point. So if this is like white says, yes, I'm going to score Warlord, everybody claps politely and says, wow, that white character, he really thinks he's going to be able to score points. Let's give him a pity point. And then we go about the hand. And then at the end of the hand, we do our city scoring down here. And then after we've done our city scoring, we score these objectives. So maybe the hand looks like this. Maybe nobody declared the 3. That happens sometimes. And here are the different objectives. So this is control the most empty systems. This is have the most fuel and materials. This is destroy the most pieces. I'll talk about that in a second. We're actually talking about it right now. The way piece destruction works is whenever you destroy a player's piece, you take it on your board. And then whenever this condition is scored, you figure out who has the most. And then after scoring it, everybody gets their pieces back. This one is most relics. This one is most terror. And this one is most psionic. So they're all pretty straightforward. It's just the matching thing. If there's a tie, both players score half. And then on 3, both players score 1 point. So it's just a tiny bit of scoring. Yes, ship pieces are limited. You can totally run out. We haven't seen it happen yet, but you can run out. Okay, cool. So that's how that scoring works. Now, back to those tech cards. Let's say you have the Galactic Rifles. When you score or tie for this condition, you get an additional 3 points. So for the player with Galactic Rifles, this isn't worth 4 points, it's worth 7. And even if they tie, they'll get 4 divided by 2, so 2, plus 3, so 6 points. Sorry, 5 points. It's been a long day and night. So these can tilt the conditions in interesting ways. It is true, Null, that if a player had all their ships destroyed, they cannot build more. That is true. We have never seen anything close to that happening. I think the most pieces I've ever seen for the ship destruction is like 8, and I think players have either 12. I think players have 12 or 14. Can't even remember. It's changed a little bit. Yeah, but players have 12 ships. I've never seen someone get close to it. And if they want to get their ships back, somebody just needs to commit to that condition, and then it'll pull the pieces back. But yeah, it is possible that you could run out of pieces. That's just a part of the game. Okay, cool. So that's those. One thing to note is that the 0 cards are only in the 4-player game, so that means this condition only operates in the 4-player game. And lastly, we've got these 6s. Now, the 6s do not have a victory condition. They have this initiative taker on them. And the way that works is if a 6 is used to follow, so following means playing on suit. If a 6 is used to follow, then the player who played it can just take the king. And it cannot be seized. Now, you'll remember seizing is a way of playing 2 cards to take the initiative. In this case, these 6s basically like block anyone else from seizing if they were to try to do it later that round. And that's because what we did is what happened in the 4-player game is we saw that the 6s were horrible because if you played one out, someone could later toss 2 cards to cancel your 6. And this card just became like the worst card in the deck, weirdly. And so we put that condition on the bottom left for 2 reasons. 1, I didn't want to introduce a 7th victory condition. And 2, it provided protection against seizure, which was nice. Is the king still a placeholder, or is it attained by love? I don't know. I love the king. It's because, as I mentioned on some other design stream, Drew and I really like the Count of Monte Cristo, and the main character and his rival are always like passing a king to each other as they have good luck and fortune, and so I love saying "kings to you" and then passing a player the king when they take the initiative. I believe so. Erzad asks, if someone plays 2 cards, can you spend that to seize? I believe you cannot. I cannot remember the ruling that we made on it, but I believe you can't. I think it's too brutal for that player to spend 2 cards and to get nothing. Um, yes. Yep. 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 Um, yeah. So in that sense, like the player can still spend the 6 if they want for the action, but they just wouldn't do the C's because only the earliest player gets the C's. Big Chimp in 11 asks a great question. When designing a new game, how much do you consider room for expansions? Generally, I do not think about expansions when working on a game. Like when I'm working on John Company, I'm not thinking like, ha ha ha, I'm gonna do like a American theater and Tea Party expansion. No, I want to just present the one definitive version of the game. However, sometimes I do think about expansions. Like now when I work on Root, I'm definitely thinking about expansions and like making sure there's enough room for future products. And then for Arcs is actually designed to be expanded. So that puts a lot of demands. Actually, it's one reason why development of this game has been so difficult, is because I'm not just trying to make like a really good game. I'm trying to make a really good game that can grow if the audience wants it to grow. And so, yes, I spend a lot of time thinking about expansions. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, Matthew, absolutely right. If you want to hear me ramble about expansions, check out the Heavy Cardboard stream. Okay, that's it. Those are all the changes. In some respects, they're big changes, but in other respects, it's like small. It's just a lot of small stuff, and the thing that hopefully that you can see, um, hopefully what you can see in this game is basically compared to the original version of the game, we had like 3 half measures that are here being combined into like one idea. So like for example, the various different locations on the board are gone because we have starports that you can use for jumping. We've got a more responsive market. The like 3 different like micro victory systems of the game that we launched on Kickstarters have been combined to this like one more, much more elegant system with also the city scoring down here. The city scoring, by the way, does a bunch of interesting things to the game. It creates a clock so that the players with cities will win the game. If the victory conditions are like stalling out and everyone's tying on them, and actually, we used to have unfriendly ties. We're still figuring not unfriendly ties. We used to have ties that didn't allow players to share points, and I'm not sure that that won't come back because I like in situations when those tie up and then the city players are kind of like slowly growing up. But I'm not sure that could go either way. But the city scoring creates like kind of a game clock, and then also the players with cities, if they're scoring points, are going to be way up here, which means the players who don't have cities might have large fleets here. So then they can go destroy all those cities, get some big leaps in points, and then score a couple of objectives on the last round for like a really dramatic finish. And so we are trying our best to make the scoring as dynamic as possible. Whereas like the root scoring, I think works great for root, but I wanted something that was like a little more fluid and a little bit more like felt like you were making a big bet or a big gambit. And that that has led to this little system here. And again, I'm not sure how these precise numbers and like if we have ties, that's like a thing that we're still like sorting out at the moment. Special buildings and blight. So they're just hiding right here. Hello, special pieces. Still probably in the game, almost certainly, but in the campaign game, and that's true for blight as well. Um, Blight just has a much clearer role to play in the campaign game, both thematically and mechanically, and so we're just not letting it clutter this version of the game. Cool. Well, when will this version be available for the public on TTS? Yes, yes, yes. It will be up at some point. I feel pretty confident about the design. I'm like, honestly, the biggest question I have right now are the bands, exact scoring here, and then I think there's a little bit of a question about whether or not players should be able to tie on these. So in a previous version of the game, basically, if 2 players tied for a condition, no one would score it, and then it would get like a little +3 marker that you would put on it, and you would say, hey, next time this is scored, or like for the rest of the game maybe, this condition is worth +3. And what that did is it would create these in-game situations where you'd have like some people way up here and some people way back here. But if these guys ever win their war, they might get, 15 points for one condition. And that created like a cool clock dynamic, which I really liked, but it might have been slightly too slow. So that is going to be a thing that I'm going to be experimenting with in the next week, and just kind of like fooling with it a little bit. But I'm really happy with the current state of the game. Now, someone said about what's the reason between the smaller bands and the higher point totals? It just creates more acceleration towards the end of the game. So if someone is here, if someone like ends here, then or what would happen more commonly is like they would play some card that would give them a boost of points. So now they're winning. They've triggered the end of the game, and so it encourages people to attack them a little bit to get some extra points. It puts a target on their back. Are these changes going to the campaign game? Yes. The general rule is the campaign game will use as many of these changes as possible with as little augmentation as possible. So, for example, I would love to use this for the campaign game, and it would and then the way the foil system would work is that maybe you're playing a role that is like very fighty, and you want to encourage other players to fight against you, and so maybe you have to put a token here that says like, hey, if other people score this condition, they get more points than I do if I score it. And so I'm still kind of sorting that out. So like imagine a world where like a little bit like the bounty system. So like I'm playing the relic protector. And so what I do at the start of the game is I put two of my cubes on this, and that basically says, hey, anybody, when you score this condition, you get 2 extra points. Except me, because it's my condition. And so that kind of like gives people an incentive to mess with the stuff that I'm doing. So someone asked about miniatures for the buildings. We are certainly looking into that, and we don't know if that like means that it needs to be a separate product or if we can possibly do it within the current budget of what we've got now. That would be ideal, of course. We're figuring it out. That kind of stuff we will probably be figuring out in later October and in November of this year, and we'll certainly update people as we go. Is a modular map expansion possible in the future? Maybe. One thing that is possible is, and I don't think it's going to be in budget, but it would be possible to have planets in Punch that you could shuffle around, and that would really dramatically change the game, by the way, if you had randomized planets with different slot numbers. And it also, like, there is a world, for instance, where this map is now dangerously close to the size of the campaign game map. And so it might be the case that the campaign map is 4 panels. And we don't actually need to put... so this is what I mean about, like, juggling the cost. Like, if we don't need to have a second map for the campaign game, then we can move some of the cost savings around between the products and make it all balance out. Or we just go 6 panel and like include some of this market and some holding zones on the edge of the board, like some more UI. I would love to have the maps be the same size, by the way. Would just love it. And it could even be like, imagine if this map were like a little bit bigger. So like I'll take out my pen here and just like, like it's like this big. Wow, that looks great. Good job, me. I do this professionally, y'all. So like imagine if the map were a little bit bigger, then the if you're playing a 3-player game, instead of needing 5 hyperlanes, you might use like 10 or something like that, or not maybe not 10. But then you can, like, this map provides like a 1 6-panel board will do the maps for everything, and then if we do future maps like the winter map and other things like that, we're just doing 1 map size for all formats, which would be great. Will the final map be made of hexagons? You're talking about these like little border decorations. It's funny. We actually went through a bunch of different shape styles, and this is the one that we've liked the most. But it's going to be up to Kyle. Like, he will certainly be drawing this by hand, so it won't look quite so artificial, fabricated. But it's going to be up to Kyle, of course. And he might choose something a little bit more fluid or whatever. We're going to be figuring that out. Ooh, this is a great question from Jimbo. During the Kickstarter, there's a lot of hot takes that didn't consider the fact the game was developing a lot. Looking back, do you think you'd do anything differently in light of all that? No, I mean, like you always expect it. I mean, I think actually the one thing, and I've mentioned this elsewhere, and I'll mention it here, my one regret about the way we ran this Kickstarter, and this is a very weird regret, and I don't mean it to sound like Machiavellian, but it might. I mean, people might take it that way, is I wish we hadn't released a print and play on day one. We had never done that before for a new product, and I wish, because the thing is, we spent a lot of time making the print and play as smooth to play as possible. I mean, I wanted people, and I had this as a goal in a meeting. I said, look, if you want to back ARCs, I want you to be able to download the rulebook, to learn how to play it in 15 minutes, and to be playing that afternoon, and then decide if you want to back it that evening. And we did that. Josh did an amazing job. Patty did a beautiful with the rules. Kyle did great art. Patty did beautiful layout. The game looked good. But what happened was it skewed the conversation because it made the people who are demoing the version of ARCs we released to backers, it made them think like they were playing a final game. And they were like, this game, it's a 7, I don't like it, or it's a 6, or whatever weird BGG score they gave it. They would have like, they felt like they were judging a finished thing, which of course it wasn't. And if we would have made the game uglier, if we would have waited to do the print and play a few days and made it a little less accessible, and I don't mean like, I just mean like instead of giving people a laid out rule book with examples, we give them like a Google Doc, the kind of stuff that we did in the past, like something very, very lightly laid out. I think it would have better communicated what phase of development the game was in, and that could have helped shift the conversation, which is probably what we'll do with a future with future titles, but we'll have to figure it out. But beyond that, like most of all these changes, I mean, I'll say most of all these changes, they in some way respond to the conversation around the game, but they also respond to my own misgivings about the game and the general arc of development, which is a lot bigger than just the Kickstarter release. The Kickstarter release is like just one part of a larger conversation around the game. Great question, Jimbo. Thank you for that. Okay. Yeah, Josh, that is the other option, of course, is just to be like ultra clear. What is your confidence this will be a final version of the game, of the short game? I don't know. It's funny, like going back and looking at. I'll do it right now, actually. Looking at arcs here. Going back and looking at this game, a lot is the same. Like just a ton is the same. And I can see that the changes are getting smaller with every version. And it's tricky though, because also, I will say, even though this looks similar to what we have now, over the past 3 months, the game has gone through a lot of big changes, and it has really swung and looked very, very different. In fact, I would load up one of those, except I think the links are all busted, and I don't know what would pop up really. But I do think that there is a real chance that this could be the version of the game that exists. Now, what's going to happen is I'm going to take my outstanding questions, things about like ties and city scoring and terror and all that nonsense. I'm going to be ruminating on those. And then if tests go well, what happens is I go back to the campaign mode. I start getting everything ready to test the campaign mode. We get in the campaign mode and we say, oh goodness, we need the core game to do this. And then we start the merry-go-round again. I would love for the final version to be only 5 to 10% different than the version that I walked you all through here today. That would be great, just from a schedule standpoint. But we are going to make it as good as we can make it. And if that means that the game needs to change in some dramatic way, then that's the thing that we do. One thing that I try to do in my capacity, both as someone who's is helping people manage a lot of different projects, is as a matter of policy and also as a matter of as like a role model. I want people who are working with me to always feel empowered to pull the emergency brake and to revise things and to feel comfortable with iteration. I get worried when a project that we're working on feels like it's locking up, and what I see is the person who's working on it afraid to pull the brake because they don't want the product to be late. Because I think there are. I mean, this is an amazing time for board games, and I'm not going to wax poetic about this too long, but I think a lot of really good games are published these days. I think that this has been the healthiest the hobby has ever been. I'm a huge backer of the fact that we have tons of new young companies doing interesting and exciting things. And the fact that like a large Kickstarter company like a CMON or something is making a lot of money on a big project that I'm not interested in, I don't lose any sleep over that because I don't care about CMON. I care about the hundreds of small companies that are existing in its wake in the crowdfunding ecosystem. That's the exciting stuff. I'm excited about the Red Burnous, right? Like those are the ones that are jazzing me about 1979. Um, and my if I have any industry critique, my only critique is that I think that there are a lot of excellent games that are happening right now. That if the designer felt empowered to revise and to tear down and to like make some big swings late in development, their game might be like really great, like really amazing. But what happens is they get cautious, they get conservative, and so towards the end of the development, you can see a design like close in on itself and try to like circle the wagons. Don't change anything. We just need to get this to print because we're worried about like 12 backers who are very vocal in the comment section or something. And I always think like stop that because you are so close to making something really brilliant and beautiful. Just trust your heart, and if you don't like it, you should just push it a little harder. And so I always tell designers I'm mentoring, if they present me with something that they think is done, I always ask them like, is this done enough for you? Because I'm happy to review it, to think about it, but if this is the thing, I want to know if this is truly measuring up to your standard or if you think this could be better. Because we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to all of you to try to make things that we think are really exceptional. And that's harder than just making something that works. Cool. All right, let me see if we've got any random comments. I don't think we do. And I will end on that note. For folks who are just kind of tuning in or have been tuning in recently, we will certainly have this Twitch stream up on YouTube eventually. Of course, you'll be able to view it on Twitch for the next 2 weeks before Twitch deletes it. And if you are excited about this new version of ARX, great. I'm excited too. We are hopefully going to have it to you within a week or two. I'm mostly just waiting on vetting a few little numbers, and also we're waiting on a few pieces of art, some new card layouts and stuff like that, which are really going to make the look of the game kind of snap together, and I wanted to make sure that we got all those things together for you all before we shared it. So I am very hopeful about this version. I've had like a really lovely time working on this project. I think, sometimes when I talk about ARCs, I might seem a little tired or frustrated, but I am the happiest warrior because this project has been so challenging for me, and I am so satisfied with where this design is. I think it's one of the best things I've ever worked on, and I can't wait for you all to play it. So take care, have a lovely Wednesday, and hopefully you'll hear back from us soon. Take care, everyone, and have a great day.